answering comprehension questions. But also, before we start with even the recording, I just want to check Nobile Nomfundo Akona. Please indicate that you are able to pick up the audio as well as the visual. All right, thank you. Now, I would like to have one of you to read the text for me, and then we will go and start. Okay, Nomfundo, I see you. But before you start reading, now the approach to a comprehension passage, first of all, we have to remember that we have two texts for a comprehension passage. The first being a linguistic text, that is the written one. And second, we have the visual text. We said the last time the visual text might be in a form of a cartoon or an advertisement. And one of the things I mentioned was the fact that you need to be very careful in how you approach the visual text with section A, because you are not going to look at your text B with visual literacy approach, and neither can you approach text B with your cartoon analysis approach. You need to have those for section C, question 3, and question 4. So with regards to section A, the whole purpose of text B is for the comparative aspect of the question, where we are going to compare a certain paragraph from text A with the visual text in text B, where you should show similarities and differences between the two texts based on what is written in that particular paragraph versus or vis-a-vis what is on the text, and that is text B. All right. Now, the line of inquiry, now that's a term I want you to always remember. When we speak of a line of inquiry, we trying to, in short, trying to get a word access. What is my access point to any comprehension passage? It is the title. And I cannot just overlook the title, because the title has a fundamental and a very important role it plays, and that is to give me access into the text. Now, I want us to look at the text title we're dealing with today. If language tells us who we are, then who am I? That's a very great question the speaker, or the writer in this case, is posing. And now, if language tells us who we are, then who am I? So this is what this text is trying to answer, or will attempt to answer, from the start to the finish. Now, Nomfundo, you can start reading. And I want you to be as slow as you can. Don't rush into it, because in each paragraph, we will need to explain certain things. But before you read, I want us to look at how the lines appear on the page. On your left-hand side, you've got your paragraph numbers. And then on your, your left-hand side, sorry. On the left-hand side, we have someone's mic is on. Please mute. Thank you. So on the left-hand side are paragraph numbers so we can see paragraph 1, paragraph 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, all the way to paragraph number 12, 11, and 12. And then on the right hand side, we have your line reference numbers. So these are very critical in answering questions because you will be referred to line numbers as well as paragraph numbers. So don't confuse the two. So every time you attempt to answer this question, you need to pay attention to line and reference. Line and paragraph, line reference and paragraph numbers as per the instructions. Okay, Nomfundo, you may begin.
Oh, sorry, sir. I wanted to tell you that I can hear you, but I can't see the text.
I thought you were trying to read.
Oh, sorry, sir.
So you still can't see the text?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just give it time. Whenever you come through. How much time do you have since you came on?
I think 7 or 8
minutes.
Yes, sir.
It should pop up by now, but okay, let's give it some time. Maybe probably it will come through. Also, you do have electricity, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if that's the case, then it means it should be your device and your network, but let's give it time. It should be able to come through very soon. As soon as it does, please indicate with a thumbs up. All right. I'm not sure, is that thumbs up saying the text is visible or you're just saying okay?
Okay, so I'll tell you when it comes up.
All right, thank you. Okay, who is willing to take the risk and read? Akona, please read.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're waiting on you.
Can I start?
Yes, please.
My father says language tells us not just who we are, but where we are. He is a wise man. It is that an I or one?
That's one. So that's line 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It is wisdom that comes from the certainty of being. He is a Wiradjuri man, born and raised in his country, the country in which he lives still.
Okay, let's just hold it right there. I need us to go through the first paragraph here. Now, I want us to look at the first line. It says, my father says language tells us not just who we are, but where we are. Now, there's one thing that the first line foregrounds about language. So if language tells us not who we are, but where we are, we have an issue of identity foregrounded in the first line. So already the topic sentence of the first paragraph has to do with identity. So the writer argues that his father had told them that the knowledge of language shaped their identity. And as a result of him discovering this truth, he is therefore a wise man. He is wise because he speaks from a point of wisdom which comes from the certainty of being. He is certain of his identity and the fact that he is a Wiradjuri man, born and raised in his country. So already the fact that the Wiradjuri comes through, it now reinforces the issue of identity, that this is a very proud man he is proud for being a Wiradjuri man who is born and raised. I mean, when you look at this phrase, born and raised, already it gave us a sense, or it gives rather, a sense of pride in his very own roots and where he comes from, which is the particular country from which he is born. He is indigenous in the particular country. So this is the country in which he was born and raised, and it is still the country in which he lives. So we find that this man has been in connection with his culture, his roots, as well as his people. But there's one thing that we also don't see in the first paragraph, which is backgrounded. What is backgrounded in the first paragraph? We don't hear anything about the evolution of his culture. Because since he is born and raised in his country, it means that his culture over the years has been evolving and changing. It has not been static. So this then says about this man, he might be a stereotypical Wiradjuri man whose mindset is fixed on how things have been, and at the same time unable to recognize that times have changed. This is a truth that we can see with our very own parents. The times have changed, but they still live in the 90s and in the 80s, because it is very difficult to allow your mind to expose itself to the current changes and things as they evolve. So that is paragraph 1. Now, as you read your comprehension passage, this I'm just showing you now already what you should do in the exam room. Of course, you don't have the leisure of the time, but you can't just read a paragraph for purposes of just flying through and not even driving through. So you need to take time to figure out what is foregrounded, what is backgrounded, and what is the topic sentence. And always the topic sentence is in your first paragraph, which gives us a sense of what the paragraph is all about. Now, I'm gonna go to the second paragraph, please.
I have also known my father to have a crisis of identity. To him, being a Wiradjuri is as natural as breathing. My father has language that speaks to his sense of place. The birds, the rocks, the trees, the hills, and the waters have names that echo through millennia. To hear those words fall from his tongue is to know who he is and where he is. Baladu Warijuri,
Give it.
giver,
Mhm.
Gari.
Linya Badu Wiradjuri. Yeah.
I am a Wiradjuri man. I am proud to be a Wiradjuri man.
All right. Now let's come back to this paragraph and try to explain what is happening here. So the second thing that we see back, foregrounded, is the issue of identity crisis. Now the argument that the writer is making here is that his father has never had one. Why? Because as a proud Wiradjuri man, Being a Wiradjuri has always been natural as breathing. It's something that he does without flinching. It's part of who he is. And the way in which he converses and expresses himself in his language speaks to his sense of place already. It speaks to where he is in terms of time, that is the milieu, or in terms of where he is in terms of his evolution, in terms of language and culture. So how he says words such as birds, the rocks, the trees, the hills, um, waters, have names that have echoed through the millennia. So to hear these words fall from his tongue is to know who he is and where he is. So at this point, we see a sense of wonder and a tone of wonder from the writer to say, my father still has the ability to say these words in his language the way they should be pronounced. It's unlike your group. When you're supposed to say umkulu neti mkulu, you have lost that. Now the argument here about his father is that his father has never lost even the enunciation, the pronunciation of certain words in his language. He even writes that in the what Wiradjuri Kibir language, and Baladu Wiradjuri Kibir Diara Malandia Padua Rijuri. So the fact that he is quoting this in Wiradjuri reinforces the issue of his father's ability to speak his language, even though or irrespective of how language has evolved over time. So the first two paragraphs are giving us a sense of context of where we are. How did we get here? So he is giving us a background to exactly what he is going to say following what we are reading right now. All right, go to the third paragraph. Akona.
Sorry, sir, I'm still finishing my notes off.
All right, okay, it's fine.
Okay. Um, it is a certainty I don't quite possess. I don't seek to possess. My life has been in the worlds in between.
Has been lived.
Oh, my life has been lived in the worlds in between. If language tells us not just who we are, but where we are, then who am I? Where am I when my language is English?
All right, now let's just pause again. Now let's look at how paragraph begins. Paragraph 3. He says, it is a certainty I don't quite possess. So there's a tone of admittal. Now, guys, you will get a question on the explanation of the speaker or the writer's tone. So as you read, you need to be able to pick up words or tone words, or the tone rather of the writer. I mean, it is a certainty I don't quite possess. He admits, so there's a tone of admittal here. He admits that he does not quite possess what his father is possessing. What is it that his father possesses? The knowledge of who he is, the unmovable and unshaken identity Christ. I mean, identity. So he has the love for his language. Not only the love, he can still speak and converse in his language. And then he sadly, so it's also a sad tone where he admits that he does not quite possess that. But at the same time, he says, he interjects, he says, I don't seek to possess. So it also gives us a sense that he doesn't even feel guilty about it. There is no sense of guilt here. He says, yes, I understand my father is this way, but I don't seek to be like him. My life has been lived in the worlds in between. In between what? Being a Wirajuri and also being in America, away from my country. And since language is all about not just who we are, but where we are, then he asks the question, then who am I? Where am I when my language is English? Now look at how he phrases this. He says, my language is English. He has embraced a language different from his father's and a language different from his indigenous language. Now, that's another word that you need to remember here, indigenous. So now I have made my life, that's the fourth paragraph, my career out of a love of the English language. Now he continues with his admitting. Now I need you to learn a new phrase or word here. A love of the English language is what we call Anglophilia. Anglophilia, Anglo for English, philia for love. So he says, I have Anglophilia because my life and my career has stemmed out of a love of the English language. I have had a lifelong passion for words and books. Now, he brings the issue of his Anglophilia, and we realize that Anglophilia to him has been accessed through words and books. Obviously, words and books written in English, be it picture story books as a child or novels as he grew up. So we see nothing in Wirajuri print that connects him to his language. So he gets to connect to a foreign language called English through the medium of words as well as books. So this is the language of Shakespeare, who could not find the divine in his sonnets. We all know his sonnets, about sonnet 130, shall I compare thee to the summer's day? A number of sonnets, Zika Shakespeare. So the question now, he gives us a question, or we call this an interrogative. He wants to know who would read Shakespearean sonnets and not find the divine. And then he continues to qualify the fact that the English language is divine as embraced by Shakespearean writings. He says this is the language that sets loose the imagination of Bob Dylan. So he brings in a writer or an author or a number of authors, by the way, Bob Dylan, and he brings in Charles Dickens, he brings in Hemingway, he brings in Twain, and he says, these are the companions of my childhood. So this means these are the authors whose work has shaped him, and not only shaped him, these are the works that have rather, made him travel the world. Because remember, I can go to China simply by reading a Chinese book. I can go to London simply by reading a London book, because it is during my reading that my imagination is let loose. So his imagination was let loose by people such as Bob Dylan, Charles Dickens, Hemingway, Twain, and so forth and so forth. Now, in the fifth paragraph, he says, my travels have opened up a world of languages, not just one language, and the people who speak them. So his travels are both literal and figurative. They are both physical and mental, through what he reads and through his physical travels. So his traveling has opened him up to a world. It does not just say two languages, but it opened him up to a world of languages as well as the people who speak them. So as he is engaging with people who speak different languages, he begins to learn their languages and he learns their culture, their modus operandi, how they do things, how they behave, how they communicate with each other, how they communicate with strangers, and then he begins to absorb that. So my closest friend overseas was an Iranian cameraman who stepped in Persian poetry. My Pakistani friends introduced me to the music of Nusrat French Ali Khan. I had no need of interpretation to feel the power of his words. I have the same feeling listening to Tuareg rock band Tinari Wayne. So already his exposure to these types of different languages has enabled him to listen to any type of music. He doesn't have to understand the words, but he needs to get into the feelings that these words and the music evoke in him. Now, other languages have words that speak with a force that eludes their English equivalent. The Arabic word for justice, ADL, means to put things in order, to return to their rightful place. That has always felt more profound to me than our Western ideas of fairness, equity, or objectivity. So, being exposed to new languages, meeting different people, understanding how they see and express their world and the world around them has enriched me. These friendships have made me a better person. So already the exposure or his exposure to new languages, meeting different people, understanding their worldview and how they express themselves has enriched me. Now look at that word choice, enriched. We are looking at wealth. It has given him a wealth of knowledge in terms of his behavior, his worldview, his language, lento repertoire, and the other things. Now, these friendships have made me a better person. So already he's saying subtly that if he was exposed to a a uni language where only his Wiradjuri language was the language he knew, he wouldn't have become the type of a person he is today. So now he continues to say, these friendships have made me a better person. I can speak some Chinese, some Arabic, and some French. I will spend my lifetime struggling and failing to master English. We all know it's one of the most difficult languages, but very wonderful languages to learn. Now, because we can't master it. Why? Why can't we master it? Just like every other type of language, it evolves. The particular words we no longer use, which were used years before. You'll be frowned upon for using particular words in English, which were used in yesteryears. So now, and then he interjects again, he says, but we're a jury. And then we have a dash. Now, which is to give us more information about what he wants to say about Wiradjuri, the language of my people. Now, in this paragraph, it seems as if he's beginning to acknowledge Wiradjuri as his own. The previous paragraphs, he's been acknowledging and embracing English as his own, but now he says the language of my people was never a big part of my life. It's a problem. It's a serious problem. And then he is going to tell us why it wasn't a big part of his life. As a boy, it wasn't spoken. Now we see the young man is not at fault for not understanding his language because the old people kept their silence. And as a result, they fashioned a patios. Now, in our glossary of term, we can see that patios or patios were dialects of a particular region. Now, please note there is a difference between dialect, idiolect, and accent. These are three different linguistic features of language. Dialect, we can be pedis, but we have Bapedi who are known as Mapulana. They speak a similar pedi. And then you would have your Batokwa. They speak a similar pedi, which is different from Bapulan. And then you have your Balobedu, who would speak their own different pedi. And then you would have then your Xhosa speakers. You'll have Amahlubi, who would speak a different dialect of isiXhosa. And then when you go to London, you find that there are different dialects of English. So that is dialect. What is idiolect? Idiolect is something that is idiosyncratic. It's something that is belonging to an individual. You decide not to call the word meta, you call it mata. Like politicians, they use that as an idiolect to say, there's serious matter. So that is your idiolect. And then accent, someone would say, well, what's this? It's water. And somebody say, someone say would say it's water. Whichever way somebody pronounce it, it's their accent. And accents are shaped by one, the types of schools we've been to. If you've been in a colored school, your accent also changes and it goes slightly to how colored would speak. If you're in an Indian school, that would be one of the things. Then you have a Mazulu who would pronounce certain words in English, but they would Zulufy them. That'd be that Zulu element in how they say particular things. So they kept silent and they fashioned patios. Now, then again, we have a dash to give us an explanation of what patios are. It is a Creole or Creole mix of Wiradjuri and English. So it's a mixture of languages. So when they mix these, so when you mix languages, you tend to lose the originality of either. So we had words for white people and police and food and animals. It was a language apart. It belonged to us, like incomprehensible to others. So if it is incomprehensible, it means it's not understood by all. So the antonym here of incomprehensible in terms of linguistic studies, we would use the word intelligible. If a word is socially intelligible, it means it is well understood by others. But now, if it is incomprehensible, it means it's not understood or it is likely understood by others. But it wasn't Wiradjuri. So in order for them to survive, they had to have a mixture of Wiradjuri as well as English so that they are not in trouble with the white people and the police. They had to develop words for food and words for language, for animals. It was a language like us, people clinging to other shattered traditions. part of an old world and not yet finding a place in the new. So already he felt as if his language was not finding a place. It's an old language and not finding a place in the new world. Now, as a result, my father's grandfather was arrested and locked up after police overheard him speaking Wirajuri to his grandson in the main street of town. Now, my father has kept faith with his grandfather. My father is now teaching Wirajuri to a new generation. Why would he do that? He wants to reinstate the love of the language so that it does not go extinct. Because if it is not used, if we go to um, I forgot this person's name, who has the law of use and disuse in evolution. He says if something is not used, it disappears and all of that. So if we don't use this language, it will disappear. It will go extinct. So my father is teaching Wirajuri to new generation. And to some indigenous people, recovering language is like recovering self. So now he says, without language, there is no you. So as they are taught Wirajuri, their language, they have a reconnection to their true self. They see it not just as a reasserting of their blackness. So all along, when you speak your language, it's like I am reasserting, I am connecting with being black. But at the same time, as you speak your Warijuri that you've been taught, it is you rejecting all forms of whiteness that includes Anglophilia. So some reclaim or create, and then he uses the word traditional in inverted commas. Already, this gives us a sense that he doesn't see these words or names rather as traditional, as original. Hence the use of inverted commas there. So he says some reclaim or create traditional names, reaching back to an ancestral past that feels more authentic than the names of the colonizers they were born with. I mean, I remember when I was in primary, a lot of the premiers and cabinet people used to use their English name, Abo Arnold Stofile, Abo Sam Shilowa. But after a while, they started reclaiming their ancestral past and they called themselves Mbazima Shilowa. So he removed the Sam, and then Arnold Stofile reclaimed his African name and used Makenke Stofile. So they started reclaiming their blackness and thus rejecting whiteness. So some had to ensure that the names they got from colonizers, which were the white people or the then government, which insisted to have what we call Christian names and African names. So that's why most of you, I'm sure about Akon and about Ngobile, you don't have English names. If you have, it means your parents are stubborn. But parents my age are only giving their children one name these days, and then they are all about Tandolwe too, about Owe too, and there are no English names because they are now reclaiming their identities. So language and names, now listen to this, are markers of identity. I mean, a marker, we have both permanent and not permanent marker. So if something is a marker, it is an indicator of something. So language and names are markers of identity. So we won't have identity without our language and our names. So which is very much important. So this is how we introduce ourselves to the world. I am so and so Waga Bani Bani. You give your name and your surname, and that's how you introduce yourself to the world. How we explain ourselves to each other is part of our names and language. Then he says, I admire this conscious effort to keep themselves and their people alive in the world, but I am wary too. Now, identity to me is not a singular thing. I prefer a layered identity. And then he says, I am a sum total of many parts. So he prefers a multi-layered identity. He wants to be a Wiradjuri and be proud of it, but at the same time, he feels he needs to be other things that he has learned from other cultures and from other languages. And it makes him a very happy person because his identity cannot be, what's this? It can be singular. It needs to be multi-layered or multi-dimensional. All right. Before we move to questions, are there any questions there regarding the text and how we have read it and scaffolded it? Okay, I think everyone is happy. Okay, I think everyone is fine. Now, let us go and see the types of questions we can get. Oh, no, not the types of questions. We need to go to text B. Sorry, text number B. That was text A. Now, look at text B. It is a poster. Now, join us in celebrating 2019 as the year of the indigenous languages. 2019 International Year of Indigenous Languages. Now, why indigenous languages? Then we have the fact that knowledge is part of indigenous or indigeneity. Knowledge of unique systems of knowledge and understanding of the world. Peace, sustainable development, investment, peace building, and reconciliation. Rights, fundamental human rights and freedom for indigenous people. Okay, we have 14 minutes remaining. Let me finish text B, and then we will end the meeting and then reconvene after explaining this this text. Kosama, I think there's someone in the lobby. Would you mind accepting them? Kosama, are you there? Okay, maybe he's not there. All right, thank you. Now, so we are looking at rights and inclusion, social inclusiveness, literacy, poverty reduction, and international cooperation. And then finally, diversity, cultural values, diversity, and heritage. So indigenous languages are a part of knowledge systems, which are unique. They perpetuate peace, sustainable development, peace building, and reconciliation. Rights, the fact that it is a fundamental human right is very much important because I am born this way with this language and it is within my rights as a human being, because when you look at human rights, it's human rights you get because you are human. And we know El Oban Fundisile about the Declaration of Human Rights. You should have studied that. So these are parts of the things we find from the Declaration of Human Rights. Now, inclusion. We need languages to be inclusive and not exclusive. So we have lived in a world where certain languages were given preference and privilege over the others. But now indigenous languages are now calling for a recognition so that they be included for diversity purposes, which are cultural values, diversity, as well as heritage. Now, let's look at the breakdown here. 7,000 languages spoken worldwide. 370 million indigenous people in the world. 90 countries with indigenous communities. 5,000 different indigenous cultures. And 2,608 languages in danger. So already, this is a cause for concern. All right. Now, let us end the meeting and then we'll reconvene. Again, we're not going to go through all the questions. I'm going to show you with a few questions how we deal with the answering of questions. And what I will do, I'm going to send back these so that you answer them and send them back to me. So in our next session, we'll begin by looking at the corrections of these particular questions, and then we move to the next aspect of our studies. All right, I'm sure you did get that. We are ending the session and then we are coming back. Because I'm worried I think you're not with us now. Are you here? The rest of us, are you still here? All right, thank you. Okay, let's end the session and then I'll send the link to our next meeting now. Sure. Okosam, you are back. Oh, it's fine. Remember, please give us the countdown as we change to the new meeting. Sure. Ever lift. That is taking anything from the text. It may be correct, but it is not going to be marked correct because the instruction here is that you should use your own words as far as possible. And I need you to consider that as far as possible. So as far as possible would mean I would change a word or two to make that particular sentence my own. Similar to what we do when we summarize, but never quote verbatim from the text. You are going to be discredited for that, because that's what we call plagiarism. You are not being original. So we need to hear your voice and how you're going to put this in your own words, which will show us whether or not you have comprehended. That's what this section is trying to assess, your ability to comprehend texts or to understand texts. Now, you will always be given a paragraph reference or a line reference. Now, refer to paragraph 1. Now, let's go to the first paragraph. Here's the problem now with using a phone, because now I have to stop everything and go back to the text. All right. Unfortunately, we'll just have to read paragraph 1 and then we'll come back to it later. We'll go back to the question. My father says language tells us not just who we are, but where we are. He is a wise man. It is a wisdom that comes from the certainty of being. He is a Wiradjuri man, born and raised in his country, the country in which he lives. Now, let's check for the questions. Now, 1.1 says, the writer describes his father as having the certainty of being. What are the main factors that give the father his certainty? I have a number of learners who answered this question and said, what gave the father the certainty of being? Avoid saying that. You are asked of the factors that gives the father certainty. The factors are, you just go straight to the factors, and this is 2 marks. Again, for 2 mark questions, it's a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 3 lines. What are the factors that give the father his certainty? Through, guys, I will not answer this for you. Fifi?
Sorry. The father knows who he is and where he is coming from, and he knows his history because of like his language. It sort of like connects him with where he lives, for example, like Australia, and knowing
Basically,
his
connect him with his roots or to his roots, right?
yes.
That's how you get your 2 marks without saying the certainty of being and blah blah blah. You just went straight to the point, and that's what I like. Thank you so much, Fifi. Now, let's go to 1.3. Remember, we are not going to answer all of these because I needed to answer them. Explain in your own words again, your own words, what the writer means when he says, I had no need of interpretation to feel the power of his words. That's in reference to paragraph 5. What did the father mean when he said, I had no need of interpretation to feel the power of his words? That was in reference to the music he was exposed to of a particular artist from another country with a different language. So he says, when I listened to their music, I had no need to interpret the feelings. I had no need of interpretation to feel the power of his words. What is the answer there? Nomfundo Ngobile akhona. Akhona.
So the writer did not need to understand nor need translation of the words that were in the song in order to be in touch and connect with the power of the words in the song.
Yeah, very good. So he depended entirely on feelings, and his language repertoire of the languages has been exposed to. All right, very great question. Answer that one. Now, I want us to look at the last question, and the rest you'll have to answer on your own. And remember, you need to send me the answer. Let's look at questions on text B. Here you are being asked of the purpose of the text B. The purpose of text B is to show that indigenous languages are old-fashioned, can contribute to the world's cultural diversity, and can prevent the world's environmental decline. You choose the best answer. So again, for MCQ, that is multiple choice questions, you only give A, B, or C as an answer. You don't write what comes after A, B, and C. Then you must give us your justification. Now, this is for 3 marks. Who wants to jump in here and give us an answer with regards to the purpose of text B? The purpose of text B, please. Come on, guys.
So may you please read the B again?
Excuse me?
May you please see text B one more time before?
Oh, you want to see text B?
Yes, please.
Oh, all right. Can you all see text B? All right. Mobile, can you see text B? Fifi, Akone sees it. Fifi, are you able to see text B? Okay, no. Let's continue. Let's not waste any more time. All right, thanks, Fifi. Thank you. The purpose of text B, what can we say? A, B, or C? A, B, or C? Or do you want me to show you again the multiple choice questions? Okay. Having seen a few things you needed to see with regards to text B, the purpose of text B is to show that indigenous languages are old-fashioned. They can contribute to the world's cultural diversity, and they can prevent the world's environmental decline. When you deal with MCQ questions, first deal with answers which are incorrect. So deal with 2 answers or 2 incorrect answers, and then you know which one is correct, A, B, or C. What's the answer? Can somebody just tell us whether the answer is A, B, or C, and then the other person will give us the substantiation? Akona?
I'm not sure if I'm correct, but I think the answer is C.
It can be. Nomfundo, you are correct with B. So indigenous languages can contribute to the world's cultural diversity. Indigenous languages are not old-fashioned, and they can't prevent world's environmental decline. The environment is declining because we have neglected our own systems of languages. So the answer here is that it contributes to the world's cultural diversity. Now, I'm going to end the session here. I'm going to leave the rest of the questions to you, and I need them sent to me before tomorrow's session so that I get time to mark and give you feedback before we begin with our next session. Understood? All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming through. Thanks a lot to Ukosam for making it possible for the recording to take to take place rather. And for those who could not come through to today's session, they can still access it later. And for you, again, in order for you to answer this question, you can also go back to the link, revisit the broadcast, watch again, be able to take notes, and then you should be able to give your responses thereafter. Okay, then, guys, see you tomorrow. I think we're meeting at 6, but I'll confirm the times and send into the groups. Great stuff. Thank you so much for coming through, guys. See you tomorrow.